Let's bring in Washington Post political reporter Jenna Johnson. All right, Jenna, so no one is surprised by Assad denying that he would use chemical attacks or weapons on his own people. This is the sort of denial we've seen from brutal dictators in many, many years past. But who was his audience here? Was he trying to speak to the Syrian people? Was he trying to address the international community? What do you think?
I think it's both. I think he's trying to speak to his loyalists in Syria, to try to spin to the people in his country who believe that he's trying to kill them and their family members, and also to their few remaining allies. This is the same kind of line of defense that we've been hearing from Russia, and the White House was fully expecting this. Earlier this week, they did a briefing and declassified some intelligence information to lay out all of the reasons why they have no doubt that it was the Syrian regime that pulled off this chemical attack and why they felt like they needed to launch a strike in response.
Jenna, let's talk about some of the foreign policy reversals we saw from the president yesterday, and there were many issues like Russia, NATO, and China. What's the takeaway from those shifts?
Well, I mean, this is not the first time that Donald Trump has changed his position on an issue, but I cannot remember one day where we had so many come just in one day. The day started with a Fox Business interview in which he said all of a sudden that healthcare reform has to happen before tax reform, even though he had been saying that, you know, he wanted to get tax reform done first. Later, he did a Wall Street Journal interview where he all of a sudden said that China is not a currency manipulator, even though that was one of his go-to lines on the campaign trail. He expressed support for the Export-Import Bank. He said that Janet Yellen, maybe he would keep her around. He would consider that. And then he had this press conference with NATO leader and said that NATO is no longer obsolete. And in each of these cases, the White House has an explanation of how things changed, and they didn't think that the labels mattered anymore. But I mean, these were very major reversals.
And Jenna, I mean, in addition to all of that, I mean, in the latest issue of the Wall Street Journal, today's paper, Donald Trump said his view on China's influence over North Korea changed after 10 minutes listening to President Xi Jinping. So how much of this is simply a president with little foreign policy experience learning on the fly, or is it really that it's that easy to influence him, which he in the past has called flexibility, but might be considered other by some people?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, let's just look at currency manipulation. China once did that. It stopped doing it years ago. And yet, as a candidate, he accused them of doing that and said that he would call them out for that. At some point, your campaign rhetoric is going to hit the wall of reality, and you're going to embarrass yourself if you continue to hold on to a stance. And so there are a few stances. Another one is waterboarding. After just a quick conversation with General Mattis, he seemed to kind of walk away from his stance on wanting to bring back waterboarding. And also, I mean, he does not like briefing books. He does not like studying up. He didn't really prepare for debates or put together very complicated statements of his beliefs during the campaign. And so now he's kind of learning on the job. And as he's learning things, you're seeing these very dramatic shifts in where he stands and what he believes in.
So how is this going to play out with his supporters? And I don't mean those people in the Trump administration, but the folks who voted for him and who voted for somebody who was very specific about the things that he was promising to them.
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Some of his supporters, a good number of his supporters are Republicans who maybe in the first place didn't agree with some of the stances that he took. And that he's now, especially when it comes to the economy, kind of moving to stances that align with what they've long believed. But there's also a lot of his supporters who hadn't voted in years, who don't really follow politics, who aren't really sure if they're a Republican or a Democrat. And in some ways, they're kind of firming up their own beliefs along with him. And they like that, unlike a lot of politicians, that he won't just stay cemented in one core belief, even if he learns something that makes him realize that's not the right stance to have. But at the same time, I think there's some leeway there for him to change stances on a few things. But at some point, he's going to change his stance on something that people really, really believe in. And perhaps one by one, he could lose followers that way. But again, it's very early, and I think everyone's just kind of waiting to see how this plays out.
During the campaign, the president said he was going to surround himself by the best and the brightest. What are your sources telling you about the leading voices in the president's ear right now? Who are the advisors driving these policy shifts?
Well, I mean, a big influence is his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his daughter, Ivanka Trump. They have been major forces, especially the last few days, where there's talk that perhaps Stephen Bannon, the chief strategist, is likely going to be leaving the White House pretty soon. And, you know, there are other people on the staff. A lot of times, it's not even on any one issue. It could be the last person who just happens to talk to the president and pitches things in a way that really stick with him or resonate with him in a way that they hadn't before. And so, you know, who has his ear seems to change almost on a day-by-day or even hour-by-hour basis.
Yeah, and after saying yesterday that relations with Russia may be at an all-time low, the president tweeted this morning, quote, "Things will work out fine between the USA and Russia. At the right time, everyone will come to their senses, and there will be lasting peace." It's a very hopeful message, but I wonder what Vladimir Putin thinks about that.
Yeah, it's a very hopeful message, very bright-eyed, and if only the world worked like that. I mean, things between the United States and Russia are very tense right now. You had Rex Tillerson, who is on a visit there, saying this is the lowest point in a long time. And, you know, you could just tell yesterday during Rex Tillerson's visit to Russia just how tense things are there. Not just with Syria, but with all of these accusations that Russia was perhaps getting involved with the campaign and things like that. And so this is, maybe that one tweet will change things, but this is a very complicated situation, and Russia does not appear to be willing to come to their senses or anything like that anytime soon.
Complicated situation, to say the least.
You sound hopeful, though, Jenna, so that's good.
Jenna Johnson of the Washington Post, we appreciate the time.
Of course.